The archetype of the comedian has been around for as long as we can remember. And oftentimes, many spiritual figures embody a portion of this role. A perfect example of this is the shaman. Oftentimes, shamans are depicted with having this sort of aloofness about them where they don't take things seriously. A perfect example of this is the character Rafiki in The Lion King. He represents the spiritual figure in that story. And this is a prime example of art imitating life in some sort of way. There appears to be this motif of those who reached some sort of profound spiritual insight to kind of laugh at life and to poke fun at things, even in grave situations. But why is that? What is this whole idea of this comedic outlook on life? I'm going to try and explain it to you as simply as I can, just off the top of my head. You have to evaluate what a comedian does, from the idea of the court jester to what we have today. It starts with the realization that I have spoken about in my previous videos, that this is some sort of game. Life is playing some sort of game. And this game has rules, and we are all involved in some sort of play, just like a child does. We never stop playing games. And if you know anything about games, the one thing that you don't like to happen is for someone to make you aware that you are playing the game. It's kind of like, as I stated in my previous video, if everyone is sitting around and playing Monopoly, you sort of spoil the fun when you make people aware in the middle of the game that this is all pretend and we're just spinning our own wheels here and none of this really matters. When we are actually playing a game, we sort of suspend our disbelief and become lost within the game. And the game has its various objectives and we become focused on that. And what the comedian does is they break the fourth wall. They point out to the crowd that we are all playing some very odd game. It's almost like they speak to the collective subconscious of humanity. It is sort of like a meta-awareness that serves as a sort of check and balance for this whole dance that we're doing. For example, with the king and the court jester, that he is there to sort of serve as a balance, to remind the king that you are playing this very high stakes, intricate game with geopolitics, resource management, military power. But at the end of the day, don't you ever forget that you're just a monkey with a piece of metal on its head. And this whole grand cosmic drama of life is absurd when you get right down to the bottom of it. And this brings me to the point of this video. I always try to introduce it and walk you to where I'm going. Comedy and laughter, or at least this term comedy as we use it today. I know historically it has had a different context, but comedy as we use it today and laughter go hand in hand. We often associate the two. But in order to understand this, you have to understand what laughter is. Why do we laugh? And despite what you may believe, science hasn't really come up with a satisfactory explanation of this. They just say that laughter releases hormones or some sort of positive chemicals that we like, and as a result, we laugh for this reason. But that is putting the cart before the horse. If you observe it, laughter is a biological reflex. It is a reflex to the absurd. Or to rephrase it, Absurdity triggers laughter. For whatever reason, this whole idea of absurdity, whenever we experience it, our only natural response about it is to laugh. And what a comedian does is they trigger this. Comedians don't make you laugh. Comedians simply point out the absurd. And when you experience the absurd, the natural outcome is laughter. A comedian is just an artist who has studied the revealing of the absurd, and they developed a technique around it to be able to trigger this response with some predictability. This is why they have something called a punchline. A punchline is the delivery of the absurd. And if you know this is what I mean by absurd. If you know the punchline already, the joke ceases to be funny because there is nothing unexpected about what is to come. When I use this term absurd, it is quite tricky to define, but absurd is kind of like randomness or chaos, or as I like to put it, it is irrational. If someone explains to you how and why the joke is funny, it ceases to be funny because you take it from the irrational and you bring it to the rational. Absurdity, why when someone slips and falls, it's funny. Simply because, as the Forrest Gump movie put it, shit happens. And that absurdity, laughter is the natural response to it. And obviously, as a society, we try and regulate what sorts of things we are able to laugh at. But we've learned that this doesn't go too well. And different people have different senses of humor. This ultimately brings me to my final point. If you aren't new to my comment, you may have heard me use this term, the realm of forbidden thought, previously. If you are new, what it is the realm of forbidden thought is simply what lies beyond beyond the human comprehension. And a perfect example of this is what lies at the end of infinity. We just simply can't fathom it. We aren't allowed to know it. And this realm where there are all of these things that are beyond our comprehension, and believe me, there are many things that are like that. It is irrational. The only way you can even begin to broach this realm that I'm talking about is to embrace the irrational. You cannot take logic inside of that place. And this is my major beef with more classically trained philosophical thinkers, to think that you can solve and understand the mysteries of the cosmos using some sort of y equals mx plus b type of thinking. It's never going to happen. And what I mean by all of this realm of forbidden thought being irrational, this means that reality is irrational. God, if you choose to use this term God, I use the term the mystery. It is irrational. It does not follow rules. It is where rules come from. We follow rules and we have to obey things such as logic. However, this realm, this entity, it is where rules go to die. This, to bring it all back to the point of this video, this thing being irrational, notice that I use this term irrational kind of synonymously with absurd. The philosopher Camus, he also uses this term absurd. But to try and simplify things, I use the term irrational. And I also use this term called magic, but I think a bit too far out for many people to follow me down that path. So I'm going to use irrational just to get my point across. Notice the wordplay of synonymous terms I've been using in this video. I've said absurd, irrational, and in the beginning, I also said chaotic and randomness. These are the key terms here, and I am using them synonymously. I am pointing to the same phenomena using these terms. Here is another term that is a synonym with the others, but perhaps you can understand this. Absurdity, irrational, chaos, randomness, or newness. Someone recently commented that I do a pretty good Terence McKenna impression, so I'll invoke him here. He would use the term, or he used the term, rest in peace. He used the term novelty. Novelty, newness, and chaos and randomness, these all go hand in hand. They are almost impossible to distinguish from one another. So to catch you up, as I always state that, life began very simply. We started off as monocellular organisms, and over the course of many, many years, things became more and more complex. Things became more and more new. And as this newness or novelty continued to develop, it is accelerating in a way. And this constant, it is like an engine that is turning over. This constant newness and novelty that is always happening is becoming more and more unpredictable. That is the chaotic element to it, that each moment or each year that passes appears to be less predictable than the next. And there is so much new stuff happening that it is becoming absurd. I think that we are feeling this now within contemporary society. We see it, that there is so much stuff happening that we can, especially with social media, that the only response is some sort of meta awareness laughter. We see this with the memes and our sense of humor today, that no matter what war is going on, which economy is crumbling, we just can't seem to take things seriously, because the natural response to this type of absurdity is laughter. And as this engine continues to accelerate and things become more and more novel, as Terence McKenna predicted, there will be this increase in this randomness, chaos, irrationality, absurdity. And as a result, everything will become a joke. If you believe, many technocrats, they believe that this is all going to some sort of technological singularity. I believe that there is some sort of singularity at the end of all of this. And I talk about this in my previous video about peace versus chaos, that whatever this thing is that is waiting for us at the end of time, it is completely irrational in nature. And when this event takes place, when we are sucked into the core of the black hole, the only logical response will be some sort of laughter, almost like a madman, like you slipped into the stereotype of the laughing madman, which would make sense because that is the entire idea of theomania or divine madness, that people who are very interested in these sorts of things, who dive a bit too deep into the mystical waters, they wander too far into the realm of forbidden thought. There is some sort of madness or psychosis that is associated with it. And I think that what is going to happen at the end of all of this, or the end of the world, is we're all going to be madmen. And whatever it is, as Terence McKenna would call it, the transcendental object at the end of time. If you want to call it Armageddon, the return of the king, who knows? I think that whatever it is, when we approach it, it will be undeniable, and every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. Hopefully you guys have been able to follow me along here. Like the video, comment, subscribe to the channel. I also have an Instagram page where I talk about things related to this, but I illustrate them in a way that perhaps you can relate to with social media. And until next time, y'all have a blessed day.